Hello everyone, welcome to Embedded ARM Dev. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a VirtualBox VM using an Ubuntu Linux image to create your development environment. Now, before we go into this, I'm going to use Ubuntu because I'm familiar with it. But if you want to use another distro that you're familiar with, that you want to use like Fedora, Arch Linux, Ubuntu, whatever, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that as long as you know where to get the image and how to work inside of it. So I'm going to use Ubuntu because I'm familiar with it. So first we're going to click over here on download, and then I'm going to click on Ubuntu desktop. Now, one thing to note is you can also come over here to alternative downloads. So if I click on this into alternative downloads, you come down here and you can get older versions if you want, like 1804 or 1910 or even 1604. If you want to get an older version, then you could do this. However, I'm actually going to just do the 2004 LTS. That's the most recent one, and LTS stands for long-term support, which means that they intend to support this particular version for a long time. So we'll click on download, and this will take a while because it's actually a couple of gigabytes. So you should see it starting down here. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video until it's done downloading, and then when it's done, we'll get back started again. Okay, so now the download is complete, and if we want to see where it is, we can just click on and click Show in Folder. Okay, so this is where it is on my computer. Instead of public, though, on yours, you'll probably see your username right here instead of public, and this is the image right here. So we're not going to open the image or do any kind of installation right now with this image. Basically, we just need to know the location, because when we create the VM in VirtualBox, we need to tell VirtualBox where this image is. Now we're going to go over how to set up the Ubuntu image in the VirtualBox. Okay, so right now I'm back on my Windows machine, but what we're going to do should be the same, exactly the same for on your Ubuntu host. As long as you're doing everything inside VirtualBox. So first thing we're going to do is click New. So we're going to create a new VM. We're going to give it a name. So I just call mine Linux Dev, but you call it whatever works for you. Type Linux and come down here and select Ubuntu 64-bit. Now, the next thing you want to select is the memory size. This is the amount of RAM that it's going to allocate for this VM. I think you probably want about 4 gigs. Okay, it depends on how much RAM you have available. If your system only has about 4 gigs of RAM, then you might want to only use about half of the RAM you have available. But you probably don't need much more than 4 gigs because we're not going to be doing anything really intensive. But you know, if you have it and you want to move it up a little bit more, that's fine. But I'm just going to set mine at 4 gigabytes. So come down here for hard disk. So there's a couple options. First one is you could say do not add a virtual hard disk. Okay, so for our purposes that wouldn't be very useful. Another thing you could do is use an existing virtual hard disk. This would be like if you had a virtual machine that you created previously and you just want to use that hard disk that already exists, or maybe someone else created one for you and they passed it to you and you're going to use this to create your image. You could do that here, but we don't have one. We're going to create a new one, so we're going to click Create a Virtual Hard Disk now. We'll click Create. Okay, so this is the location. This Linux dev.vdi. This is the actual hard disk, the virtual disk. Okay, this is fine for the location. I usually just go to default. File size. So this is the size of the hard disk. So when you boot up into your Ubuntu VM, it's going to look like you have a 10 gigabyte hard drive here. Okay, size it however you need. 10 gigabytes should be plenty. I think 5 would probably be a good number to use, but I wouldn't do too much because you might waste space on your computer. Definitely, so the hard disk file type, just leave this as VDI. This one, dynamically allocated, is pretty nice because it won't create a 10 gigabyte file right away. It'll grow it as the size of the operating system and the file system grows with it. So dynamically allocated would create a smaller file and it'll grow. If you do a fixed size, you can do that, but it'll create a 10 gigabyte VDI from the beginning, and then it'll always be there. So you might want to do this if you're working on a shared system and you want to guarantee that this will always be able to reach 10 gigabytes if it needs to. But if you're just working on your own system, then I recommend doing it dynamically allocated. Also, if you do fixed size, it will take a while once you hit create, because it has to create that image, and it does take some time. If you do dynamically allocated, it's pretty much right away. Okay, so everything's ready. We're going to go ahead and hit create, and it's ready. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click start. In a second, you'll see a window come up. Okay, there it is. So yours might not say, yours might show like, some kind of random optical drive or something like that. You're definitely not going to use this VBox guest editions. Yours probably doesn't say this, but you're not going to use that. So what you want to do is click on choose a virtual disk, and then so for mine, you can see I already have this on here. This is we downloaded the Ubuntu image already, and so I've got it on here. If you don't have this in here, you just click add right here, and then you just navigate to where it is, and you select it and you hit open, and it'll add it to here. So now I'm going to go ahead and click Ubuntu. This is the image we're going to use to install Ubuntu on the VM. So I'll click choose, and you see here that we are allowed, it says start, so this is the right image that we want to use, and we're going to hit start. So what this is going to do is going to start, this is going to be like a bootable media, this ISO image, and it's going to allow us to install Ubuntu onto this VM that we've created. So we'll go ahead and hit start. Okay, and then you should have this window popped up, and this is a good sign. Okay, no errors found, that's good. So you see this little banner up here. This virtual machine reports that the OS guest supports mouse pointer integration. So all that means is you can move between the OS and the guest system without having to change your, without having to like capture it in any way. So that's pretty nice. That's pretty handy to be able to do this. Okay, so if I maximize this, so you'll notice that it's windowed right now, so it's not taking up the full screen. If you're on Ubuntu, your host is Ubuntu, you may not see this window. It might be full screen for you already. But don't worry about that. We're going to fix that. Okay. So now you have two options here. You can try Ubuntu, or you can install Ubuntu. Try Ubuntu is be if you just want to try running it on your computer to see what you think of it. And then you could, when you power it down and turn it back on, you'll just have your original operating system like Windows or whatever, and it won't affect your computer. But since we're working with a VM, we're just going to go ahead and install it. So first come over here and select the language that works for you, and then click on install Ubuntu. Okay, again, it's asking your keyboard layout, so I'm going to select English. Okay. So I'm going to do a normal installation. You could do a minimal if you're worried about size, but I don't think that's going to be an issue for most of us. It's sometimes nice to have some Office software and other utilities, so I just go ahead and click normal. I would do this if you can. If you don't have an internet connection, then this will be grayed out probably. But I would recommend doing this because then all of the utilities, the software, everything, it'll download the updates while it's installing Ubuntu, which is nice. And then I go ahead and do this just in case, because if your system is using like a Wi-Fi chip that is proprietary or something like that, then you might need third-party drivers to make it work. It just depends on what chipset you have. So I usually just check that to make sure that there's no issues. Okay, so then we'll hit continue. Okay, so then we get some options here. So now remember, this is what we're installing on this VM. So this is not going to be installed on your host computer. Okay, so this is actually what we want. We want to erase the disk and install Ubuntu. So this, when they say disk, they're talking about that 10 gigabyte virtual disk image that we created. If you want to do your own partitioning, you can click on this, and when you click continue, it'll allow you to set up partitions. I might do a video later that talks about how to set up partitions on Linux. There's probably other videos that already exist. For our purposes, I think we can go with the standard setup, the default partitioning, which you just click on this and allow you to do. So we'll just do erase disk and install Ubuntu, and then do install now. So this is the partitioning. This is what it's going to look like when it's done. This is fine, so we'll just go with the default, continue. Okay, and that allows you to select your time zone. Okay, so you fill this out, it'll ask you your name. Doesn't really matter. Okay. Okay, this is the computer name, and then this will be the username. Okay, that's your login name. And so then you just give it a password. Okay, mine's kind of simple, but that's fine. And then we'll hit continue. Okay. So now this is going to take a while. Depends on how fast your computer is. It could take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and just let this roll, and then we'll resume once it's done. Okay, so now that that's complete, hopefully it didn't take too long for you. We'll go ahead and hit restart now. And it'll say remove the installation medium and then press enter. This is fine, like if you were installing from a bootable thumb drive or something like that on an actual physical computer, then you would want to remove that, but right now for us, we don't need to, so we just go ahead and hit enter, and it'll boot back up. Okay, so there's your login, and I'll just type in the password that I use. Okay, so we can go ahead and just skip this. We're not going to do anything with that. So one thing you'll notice here is that this is running in windowed mode, so this isn't a very good display for us. So we're going to go ahead and try and fix that by installing the guest edition CD. So what you do is you go up here to the VirtualBox menu right here, click devices, okay, and then go ahead and click insert guest edition CD image. Okay, this contains software intended to be automatically started. Would you like to run it? So go ahead and click run. Okay, authenticate. Okay, pulls up terminal. Okay, running kernel modules will not be replaced until the system is restarted. So we do have to restart it. So we'll go ahead and hit enter. Oops, more keyboard. Okay, so now what we're going to do is go ahead and power off. Just click power off, and this will turn the virtual machine off. Okay, so now before we start back up, we're going to change a couple settings. So go ahead and click settings here, and then come down to display, and then go ahead and max out your video memory. 128 megabytes is not much. You can enable 3D acceleration. I don't know that we'll be doing anything that needs it, so maybe just leave that unchecked. All right, now another thing we're going to change, go back into settings again, general, and then we're going to go to advanced. And the shared clipboard and drag and drop, this is actually pretty nice because you can copy something on your host and then paste it into the virtual environment, and then drag and drop, you can actually just drag a file over. I tried to enable this to facilitate, development. If this is a security concern for you, then don't do it. But I think it's really helpful to get files between the host and then the VM. So we'll go ahead and click OK. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start it up again. So I'm going to click View Full Screen Mode. Note that it says that the shortcut key is Host F. So on mine, the shortcut key is the right control key, but you may want to look up and see what it is on your system, but it's probably the right control. So control F should put it into full screen mode. Okay, and it pulls up. So yeah, here it'll tell you the right control is the current host key is currently defined as right control. Okay, so we'll go ahead and switch. Okay, we'll log in. Okay, now we have a full screen, which is great. So now we have the VM box set up and configured, and we will go ahead and start setting up the development environment. All right, so the first thing I want to do is we're going to go ahead and update and upgrade everything, all the packages and the software on. So to pull up a terminal, you just click Alt-T. Just Control-Alt-T, I believe. There we go, Control-Alt-T. Okay, so here it says to run an administrator command, you have to use the sudo. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Linux, sudo sudo is a command that temporarily gives you administrative privileges. Now, by default, the account that you created, dev in this case, I created the account dev, is part of the sudo. Sudo stands for sudo. And so there's a list, sudo is a list of users who have access to this command. And so by default, when you created this account, it's added to the sudo list. So basically you can get administrative privileges. Okay. So there are some commands that will require you to use this. And the apt install is one of them. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to run the command called apt-get. So apt is a package manager. Okay. And this is the one that Ubuntu uses, and it allows us to download and install software onto the operating system. And it's a really cool utility, and I generally install everything on command line just because it's easy. So in this case, apt-get is the primary command, and then we're going to give the next command, which is update. And so what update does is it updates all the list of available packages and their versions. So there's a whole bunch of, I'm not going to get too deep into repositories and how all of this works. It keeps a list of repositories where all the software is. And so when it updates, it'll check all these repos to see what the latest version of all of the packages are. And then that way it'll update the local list saying, hey, these particular packages, there's new versions available. And it will, so when we run update, it doesn't do anything except update that list. It doesn't upgrade anything. It doesn't change anything on the computer as far as the software versions or anything like that are concerned. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. So you'll have to type in your password because it requires the admin privileges. And you see it updating. Those are all the repos. Okay, this may take a minute. Okay, and we're done. So all the listing is updated. And so now I'm going to go ahead and do the upgrade. Okay, so if you hit the up arrow, it'll give you a previous command. So I'm just going to backspace over this and type upgrade. So now what this will do is this will upgrade all software on the operating system that there's a new version for. Okay, this might take a while on my computer. So we'll go ahead and let it roll, and then we'll resume once it's done. Okay, so if it asks you if you want an additional disk space, asking you to authorize that, go ahead and just hit Y for yes and hit enter, and it'll roll forward. Okay, so my upgrade operation is complete. It didn't take too long. A couple months after I finished, this software updater popped up, which is really weird since I did the upgrade already. You can if this pops up, you can do install now or remind me later. I'm going to go ahead and do remind me later because it's probably not going to affect anything that we're going to do. And that's it. We're done. So now you have an Ubuntu Linux VM suitable for setting up a development environment. I hope you found this video useful. Leave any questions or comments you have. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.